Welcome. In this video, we'll explore the immensity of the gift of God's holy divine will. We'll discuss our littleness as compared to this immense gift. We'll talk about living the gift, and the gift as the third Fiat. And last but not least, we'll look at obtaining the gift of the divine will and see what Jesus tells Luisa about how to obtain it. Now let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. When we obtain the gift of the divine will, we are sharing that will with Jesus. And because it's divine, the nature of it is to traverse all of creation and also to transcend time itself. So when we embrace the divine will, we are embracing everywhere that the divine will exists. According to our capacity, we are embracing all of creation, not only creation as it exists today, but as it existed yesterday, and as it will in the future, along with all the acts throughout eternity. Let us start off with a reading from volume 33, February 4th, 1934. So all our works, heaven and earth, creatures that come out to the light of day, seem to depart from us. But know they are all inseparable from us, and this by virtue of our immensity, which is such that, enveloping everything, there is not one point where it is not present, rendering everything we do inseparable from us. Therefore, neither can our works separate from us, nor can we from them. It can be said that they form one single body for us, and our immensity and power are like blood circulation that maintains a life for everyone and for everything. Now this description, it's reminiscent of an ecstatic vision that St. Thomas Aquinas had. After he completed his landmark work of the Summa Theologica, he had this vision before the cross where Jesus spoke to him from the cross and actually thanked him for his work, and asked St. Thomas, what did he want in return? And St. Thomas Aquinas stated that he wanted nothing, that he did it all for love of him. And he went into ecstasy, and Jesus showed him, manifested to him, the glory of his existence, of the existence of God. He showed him something of his nature. And when St. Thomas returned out of ecstasy, he was noted to say that all he has written seemed like straw compared to what was manifested to him. And that is saying a lot, because what St. Thomas has written, which was almost 800 years ago now, was one of the greatest works within Catholicism. It is still studied and referred often to today, and it will be in the future as well. And what was manifested to St. Thomas was the fact that God exists, as he put it, exists in everything, and everything seems to exist in God. Let us take another reading, and I'd like to go to volume 2. And in that volume, we don't have dates, as you know. I add that the light of the sun diffuses everywhere, In the same way, God penetrates everywhere with his immensity However, let us remember that this is but a shadow, because the sun cannot reach where it cannot penetrate with its light, while God penetrates everywhere. And we know that God's eternal act is one continuous eternal act. It spans time, the past, present, and the future. All of the acts, whether they were to be done in our future or in our past or present, exist to God in his eternal act. They exist to him in God's eternal now. When you look at the relationship of time to the eternal now, there's also an implication there which is beyond our comprehension regarding space. If all the acts exist together in the eternal now, then space itself doesn't appear to God as it does to us. Indeed, a God who is everywhere, who permeates all of existence, as said in the first reading, in every point, not just within our worlds, but everywhere. In the solar system, in the galaxy, all the galaxies in existence, and that which is beyond the boundaries of our comprehension. God exists in all. So, that being the case, let us take a brief exercise and consider the immensity of God. And let's use the analogy of the sun, which is often used in the Book of Heaven, which Jesus just mentioned in Volume 2 is but a shadow. We can easily embrace the concept and idea of the whole world and understand that God exists throughout everything in the world, because the world is something that we know. And we can look at the sun and understand that also God exists in the sun and in the solar system itself, which we are familiar with. However, when you look at the sun from a different perspective, say we were on the other end of the galaxy, the sun would be but a speck of light, may not even be discernible to us because of all the other stars in the galaxy. Then you begin to understand the immensity of God's presence and of his divine will, which exists in all of these places. And when we do the rounds, we try to embrace all of creation. It becomes difficult as we go further and further out into the unknown. And let us look further. We understand the idea of a galaxy, and perhaps we can endeavor to embrace that within the rounds. But how about the multiple galaxies that exist in our universe? And where do they end? Where do they begin? So there is something left beyond our comprehension that we cannot grasp. Therefore, we need to walk in faith as we go through the rounds, to embrace creation and all the acts that have ever occurred within creation and beyond. When we look more specifically, we have to realize we don't even know the acts within our own lives because we don't remember them. So it's not a matter of itemizing acts when we go through the rounds. It's a qualitative process. It's a matter of being attentive. It's a matter of fusing with our Lord and embracing his acts in the creation and the acts of all, and offering reparation for acts done imperfectly. Now let us look at our own limitations when it comes to the immensity of the gift of the divine will and what Jesus tells Luisa about it. Let's start with volume 34, August 23rd, 1936. Daughter of my volition, did you see how the immensity of my fiat is unreachable? No created mind, as holy as it might be, can embrace it and see where its boundaries end. And again, there's a very short one, volume 1, where Jesus speaks of even the saints in heaven and the angels in heaven have difficulty comprehending God, even those before the beatific vision. So let me read volume 1. So the blessed in heaven cannot comprehend God perfectly, because the immensity, the greatness, the sanctity of God is such that a created mind cannot comprehend an uncreated being. And one more reading, which describes the same subject. This is from volume 34 again, January 10th, 1937. More so, when the creature is united with my will, where can she not reach then? She cannot embrace our immensity, because to no one is it given to be able to embrace it. But of everything that was made for her, as long as she remains in our fiat, she was given by us the right to be able to enter everywhere, to embrace everything, and to make our works her own. And this speaks of not being able to embrace the immensity of God, but being able to go everywhere and embrace everything within it, based upon what has been made for us. So there is a limitation that we have here in our capacity to embrace all of creation. Now, that being said, it does not limit the gift itself. It's only a limitation of our capacity to receive it. What we do not receive spills out beyond us and also benefits other souls and benefits creation itself. And this reminds me of a teaching of St. John of the Cross. And I'll paraphrase St. John of the Cross here, where he says that that which we can comprehend with our senses is insufficient for us to attain to God. And it's the same type of limitation that we have when we attempt to comprehend the immensity of God's gift, the immensity of God himself. Now let's look and see how God, in giving us this immense gift, deals with our little capacity. And let's go to a reading in volume 24, July 4th, 1928. Therefore, only one who possesses my fiat can take everything and give me everything, because having the virtue of extending heavens, of forming stars, etc., whatever it is, she has the virtue of taking everything and of embracing everything. This is indeed the great prodigy of the living in my will. Littleness can carry and embrace immensity. Weakness can carry strength. The nothing can possess the all. The creature, the creator. Wherever there is a life of my divine will, there are all prodigies united together. The infinite, the eternal, lets himself be carried as though in triumph in the little arms of the one who lives in it. Because in her he looks, not at her, but a divine will that has a right over everything, can do anything, and embrace everything. In this discussion of the littleness of our souls versus the immensity of the gift of the divine will, it sounds like the parable of the mustard seed. And in that parable, which can be found in St. Luke chapter 13, verse 19 through 21, in that parable, Jesus describes the cultivation of the small mustard seed, the tiniest of seeds. And of course, in this parable, the cultivator is Jesus in the field. And this seed is sown into this field, and it grows into a tall tree, a tree that dominates the horizon and even provides refuge for the birds of the air. And Jesus refers to this mustard seed and says the kingdom of heaven is like this mustard seed. And so it is like the divine will also, where it begins in a little creature. Also in the same chapter of St. Luke, God says that the kingdom of heaven is like the leaven that is entered into the meal, and the leaven disperses everywhere. And so it is with the gift of the divine will, or the divine will that we share exists everywhere. And although our capacity is limited, because in the divine will, we do through participation with Jesus what he does by his nature. And we do not possess his nature, but only his gift, which is a great and glorious gift. Another quote that I believe is very pertinent to our discussion here is one by St. Teresa of Avila. And when she discusses the indwelling of Jesus in our souls, she says that it is more than Jesus. She says that the king does not go anywhere without his court. Where the king resides, all of heaven resides. That's a beautiful statement, and it applies very much to the divine will, where we share in the omnipresence of God, the ability to be everywhere because God exists everywhere. When we have the divine will, our presence is everywhere that the divine will exists. Now let us talk about living in the gift, the immense gift of the divine will. In this first reading, Jesus is speaking to Luisa about the difference between living in the divine will and living outside the divine will. And let us go to volume 34, May 20th, 1936. My daughter, there is no comparison between the two. The first, by calling my will into her acts, strips herself of what is human and forms the void in her human will, in which to give place to mine. And mine embellishes, sanctifies, forms its light within that void. Then it pronounces its creating fiat and calls to life its divine operating within the human. And the creature not only participates, but becomes the owner of the divine act, which possesses the power, the immensity, the sanctity, and the divine value that is never extinguished. Therefore, in one in whom our will reigns, we look and find our very selves and our own acts that honor us and form a crown around us. On the other hand, with those who do good works but are not animated by our will, we do not find ourselves, but the finite act of the creature. And since we can't really keep anything of whatever good they may do, we give them the merit as a recompense. And what Jesus is saying there is that acts done in and with the divine will through participation create the divine act. And you become an owner of that divine act. And we mentioned the eternal act. The divine acts exist within the eternal act. And they exist not only as we would understand them to be created, but they exist without any relevance to time. So they transcend the idea of time itself. So that a divine act created yesterday, or today, or next week, already exists within the one continuous eternal act of God. Now, this great gift of the divine will is becoming more and more prevalent, and we should be thankful for that. And because of that, there are many new people who have just become aware of it and are just trying to live it and study it. So we see that there are many who are in different stages. Some are just trying to understand what it is. Others are beginning the process of asking for it and studying for it. And others have been studying it for a while. And one of the things we must do, especially for those who have been attempting to live in the divine will for a period of time, we need to be very attentive to those just attempting to enter the divine will and to learn about it, and to make sure that they understand what it is and to help them the best that we can. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter. You don't necessarily need to be someone who has a channel about the divine will on YouTube, or someone who is an author of a book, or someone who is a theologian. Just anyone who's attempting to live and obtain God's great grace and gift of the divine will. We are all beginners at one point, and we all know what beginners need. So be ready to answer questions, and be ready, please, to provide help. And to perhaps illustrate this and what we're talking about, the different stages of living in the divine will, and also the gift itself. I'd like to go back to the Bible and talk about the story of Jesus with the Samaritan woman at the well. And it goes like this. Jesus was at Jacob's well, and a woman approached the well, and he asked the woman, the Samaritan woman, for a drink. And the woman provided him a drink of water. And the woman questioned him because, being a Samaritan, Jews didn't usually speak with Samaritans. And Jesus said, if you knew who you were speaking to, you would know that I could give you living water, that you would never thirst. And she asked about the living water from this well, and asked if she could obtain it. And the divine will is very much like this Jacob's well, and the living water that Jesus speaks of. You have many go to the well, and they have a small cup, and they enter the cup into the well, and they obtain what they sought, and they're happy, because the cup is all that they sought, and a cup of water is what they obtained, and they're happy with that. And others, you may see, They approach the well with a bucket, and they fill the bucket, and they quench their thirst, and they take the water with them, and they too are happy, because a bucket of water is what they sought, and a bucket of water is what they obtained. And so too with those who bring 2 buckets. Now, those who bring the cups, although they may be happy in obtaining their cup of water, they see those that bring the buckets, and they say, I too will bring a bucket, and I will draw this water so I may take it with me and have this living water with me continuously. Now let us turn to this gift of the divine will as a fiat, and understand it as a fiat. And we'll do this by comparing it to the second fiat, redemption. And let me go to a reading, volume 18, March 19th, 1926. My will is eternal in time and eternity. It had no beginning, nor will it ever end. On the other hand, though being eternal in the divine mind, redemption had its beginning in time. It was a product of the eternal will. So it was not redemption that gave life to the divine will, but it was my will that gave life to redemption. And so when you look at that as the redemption had its source in the divine will, as did the Immaculate Conception also had its source in the divine will. The incarnation of Jesus had its source in the divine will. Looking at the second fiat from that perspective, the source of the second fiat, redemption, was a divine will, and its object was the redemption of mankind. Looking at the third fiat, you can understand how the third fiat is so much greater than the second. The third fiat has a source in the divine will, and also the divine will is its object. Now let us look at maybe the most important topic in our discussion regarding the immensity of the gift of the divine will, which is how to obtain it, how to grow in it. How do you obtain such an immense gift? And I'm going to do another reading. This is from volume 29, July 13th, 1931. Now you must know, my daughter, and any time Jesus says to Luisa, you must know, please pay attention, because not only Luisa that must know, but you as well. Now you must know, my daughter, that the passport in order to enter into my kingdom is the resolute will of never doing one's own will, even at the cost of one's life and any sacrifice. This resolute act, but true, is like the signature that one puts on the passport in order to set off in the kingdom of my divine will. And while the creature signs in order to set off, God signs in order to receive her. And indeed, and Jesus speaks of his Blessed Mother living in the divine will, and he makes clear that she never acted out of her human will. Although of course she possessed a human will, she always acted out of the divine will. And so it's important for us that we also, if we wish to enter the kingdom of the divine will. We sacrifice our own human will to do God's. And Jesus continues to Luisa, but the passport is not enough. One must study the language, the ways, and the customs of this divine kingdom. And these are the knowledges, the prerogatives, the beauties, the value that my will contains. In other words, understanding what it is that you seek. And he continues again. In addition to this, one must pass from the study to the practice of what was learned. And after a length of practice at last, he is declared a citizen of the kingdom of my divine will. And then will he enjoy all the happinesses that are in a kingdom so holy. Even more, they will be his own properties. And he will acquire the right to live in it as in his own fatherland. And that is one of the distinguishing features of the gift also, that it is a gift that we can possess. We take possession of it. We live in the divine will as if it's our own. We share the divine will of Christ. And not as the saints have lived in it, where they were subject to it, but did not possess it. It is for these times that the gift is available to us. Now, this being said, and how we should proceed in obtaining this gift, and how we should live in it and practice it, it's also fundamental to go back to the idea of it being a gift. It's something that's given by God. And it's not something that we earn. We cannot earn it. It is not as if we do A, B, and C, then God must give us this gift. That's not how it is at all. First of all, it is important to discuss the immensity of this gift first, so that we can understand that there is no possible way that we could earn such an immense and glorious gift. In light of the enormity of this gift, it is clear that we can never do enough to earn it, and we're dependent upon the generosity of God and his divine love. And what we can do is do what Jesus asks us to do regarding receiving this gift, and cooperate. Jesus is like in the parable of the pearl of the great price. He is offering us this pearl of great price. All he is asking for in return are the little trinkets that we have of our own human will. These little trinkets are small attachments we have. And when compared to the immensity of this gift, they're like dust. They're nothing. They're here today and they're gone tomorrow. Whereas the gift of the divine will, even the acts that we do, they're eternal and everlasting. I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and please like and subscribe. It helps us promote this content and spread the good news of the divine will.